I'm joined by Martin from Ambassadors Football. Hello, Martin.
Hello there. Hi.
Right, let's just jump straight into the name. Ambassadors Football. I think that's fairly self-explanatory, but just give us a bit of an overview. What's all that about?
Yeah, well, actually, it was up for debate 35 years ago when the organization began because four American families came to Bolton in England and they wanted to share their faith through football, soccer, the round ball game. And they were called ambassadors in sport because they didn't want to offend all the people in America that might not understand what the name football really meant. But then they didn't want to offend the English that they were trying to reach out to by calling it ambassadors soccer. But after 20 years, we changed the name. So the theme is football's the vehicle, and sharing faith in Jesus is what we're trying to do. So we're being ambassadors for Christ, as it says in 2 Corinthians. So we're trying to share our faith and representing Christ on the field of play or around the field of play in football as one of the best international languages that you've got and breaks down lots of barriers. So football's the vehicle, and sharing our faith is what we try and do as ambassadors for Jesus.
Even in war zones, did you see this photo when you were at school of the English and the German soldiers in opposite trenches getting together to play football?
Yeah,
It's an
absolutely.
iconic thing, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And at various World Cups, I always remember when I was growing up, I think it was in the 80s and early 90s, Iran ended up playing the USA in the World Cup. And it broke down, racial and tribal barriers, and has proved to do that ever since. Really, yeah. It's certainly it's got the ability to do that, and obviously it's just a tool or a vehicle for expressing worship and praise to God, and it could be used for not so good purposes as well. You don't see it's not that football is inherently good, but it can certainly be used for good.
Amen to that. Now, I have to be completely hands up. I'm not a football fan. If I was going to watch a sport, it would be rugby or perhaps rally driving. That would be more my kind of thing.
That's all right.
However, I know that football is powerful, but I just wanted your take on this before we delve a bit more into your life. Because even I, who don't watch football very often, have noticed the amount of good God stuff coming out across the football field through people with tattoos or t-shirts or something in order to say, look, do you know what? I love Jesus Christ more. Just curious, how big a thing is this? Because I'm watching this growing, but I'm quite far to know, is it really a thing or is it just the media's picking up on it? Is it actually growing?
Yeah, I really do think it is. I've been involved in this type of work for over 30 years. And there was a danger in the 1990s that there were not so many famous Christian sports people. And so, therefore, and there's always a danger in any walk of life, and in your business, you'll think about this, where the person becomes greater than the message. And you put that person on a pedestal. If they fall or they fail, then it's like, oh, look at that. Look how bad, what's happened to Jesus being glorified through this. And so there was a danger that that was happening. And there weren't that many famous sports people, let's say, or, high quality sports people involved who love Jesus. So nowadays, I think there's a new generation, definitely, especially in England, of footballers that have been brought up in church and have made commitments to follow Jesus and kind of unashamedly saying, hey, I'm a human being, but God is greater. So therefore, I'm pointing towards him. I'm not the answer to the world's problems, but I think Jesus is in my life and he can be for other people. So we're definitely seeing it more and more. And there's more of an acceptance of that, I think, in current society. There's a spiritual element, and we've seen it in surveys done recently about people getting more excited or interested in church in England in particular. But obviously, football's a global game and global business. But the Premier League is by far the richest and most influential league, if you would, around the world. So the amount of believers that are playing in the Premier League is more than it ever has been, and they are willing to stand up for their faith, saying, "Well, it's just what I believe." So, just in the Community Shield on Sunday, Crystal Palace's captain had 2 verses from the Bible stitched onto his boots that had been made for the game, and that was on social media. Social media, it can be again used for good or bad, but there's a group called Ballers in God that highlights professional players in particular who are following Jesus. It doesn't, say that it's got all the answers, but it'll point people towards, oh, look, well, this is what's happened today. Look at this verse in the Bible. How do you deal with this? And it started out as a professional footballers support group, really, for Christians. But it really does help those players and highlights the faith that they've got. Yeah, it's definitely happening more now than ever.
Now, I remember when I was a lad in the Scouts, my scout leader would talk whimsically of Wolverhampton Wanderers, which is where I was brought up. The team would be on the local bus next to him, and the players would be getting the bus in because they weren't on high salaries. He would talk whimsically as he looked backwards to that in his 40s and 50s. And this is 30 years ago, which sort of, frames it a little bit. And now, clearly, football has earned quite a bit of money, but I'm more interested in the communication of international sort of stuff, because back in the day, I think the only thing that was really relevant from that story was a lot of the Wolverhampton players would have been more local to Wolverhampton, where, of course, now that's transformed. Do you think that the input of more international influence, more players from abroad, not just outside the city or the town, but actually the country and even the continent, do you think that's led to a more openness or perhaps more bravery to talk about faith?
I think so. Yeah, I think some people will come into a club and depending on their cultural background, not even necessarily from another country, but how they've been brought up within Britain in their culture, they're ready to express their faith, and they're taught from an early age. This is what you do. Coming back to the captain of Crystal Palace again, Mark Gay, he said that he was brought up going to church. It was something that he did. It was a big challenge when he was playing in academies, but God was first, footballs, and the rest came afterwards. So therefore, you have to make some choices. But he knew that growing up, so therefore he was ready to express that. And I think the influence of believers from other countries and those of other cultures within that footballing community does help create an environment where it's acceptable. You're able to talk about a variety of issues, and that includes faith, and they'll be ready to pray with one another if you've got a couple of believers in the team, or they'll be wanting to, talk about some elements of their weekend, going to church or, reading the Bible. So there's definitely that element more now.
So I suppose a way of summing that up is to say, look, it's normalized more. And because we've had more people from more places coming in, actually, that conversation is a more natural, less, I'm going to talk about Jesus, it's a big deal, but actually it's just a regular conversation more frequently.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that's what Jesus wants us to be like. And just that, hey, I'm part of your life, and just take me with you wherever you go. We're not just for Sunday, obviously, and a Wednesday night. But it's part of our lives. And I think that separation sometimes, and it was done even without consciously knowing it was happening, but throughout the 20th century there was a little bit of a separation between here's my faith, here's my politics, or the famous politicians have said that. But now I think it is, well, this is, of all faiths, people will express publicly, here's what I believe as a Hindu or Muslim. And so for Christians it's like integrated into your life more, which is how it should be, really, and I think that's a good thing.
Amen to that. Right, now, let's explore a bit more of your life. You're talking a lot about faith, Christianity, Jesus Christ. So let's go back in time a little bit. Where did faith begin for you?
Collyhurst, Manchester, which you might not realise, but Nobby Stiles came from there. Brian Kidd as well, round the corner, for those who know anything about Manchester football. So I grew up in North Manchester and went to church with mum and dad as I was growing up. When I was about 15, there was a man who came and did a mission to men, actually, and my dad committed his life from being a car mechanic to wanting to be a pastor or a full-time minister, and in the final meeting. And I felt like I should commit my life to following Jesus there for myself. So I'd grown up knowing all the stories, but I wanted to make them real for myself. So I did that, and didn't really consciously think much had changed, but I was more interested in the direction of my life, wanting to do something that would count for God's kingdom, and not just build up my own kingdom in some way. So I was conscious of that as a teenager. So that's where faith first came into my life, and then decisions that I made probably post the age of 15. I was thinking and praying more about where I should go and what I should do, and then got challenged to do other things for Jesus as step by step as things went forward.
I think God often takes us on a little journey, and that journey can be a little bit erratic sometimes, and sometimes there's a bit of a straight path. I like those bits. It was a Tuesday 4 years ago, I think. There was a little bit of a straight path. But that's the thing about the journey with God, is he's going to take us to amazing places. So your dad was a mechanic, met somebody, a conversation happened. Need to ask the question, did he become a pastor, or is it just something he wanted to do that was such a radical change?
Yeah, no, I was a teenager, and so then we were in the Church of England, so he started investigating, and I would say during my teenage years, yeah, the actively being involved in church and his faith became more active in his life, so therefore it affected our lives. One thing that we did, whether this is the right thing or not to do, but he gave up his league match ticket book for Manchester United. So I used to go between my mum and dad went before I was born, and in the 60s watching George Best and Bobby Charlton, Dennis Law, and so in the 80s we went for a few seasons every second week. But then because of the time commitment and the money, we gave up that ticket, which I wondered at the time, oh, Dad, what are you doing? But yeah, he got more involved and then trained to be a vicar, and then had a church of his own in North Manchester, just south of Bolton, for 10 years in the 1990s. So yeah, God led him on that journey from car mechanic to car manager, service manager at a big dealership near Old Trafford, actually, and then into working for the Church of England.
Which is a really good example of why it's important for us to share our faith, whether it's naturally on a football pitch, or somewhere around the football world. Actually, it transforms life. It transforms the life of your dad and your family and yours. Where did faith lead you? You talked about how faith started to influence your journeys, mid to late teens, but where did that then take you?
Yeah, well, when I was 17, I went to Keswick, actually, in Cumbria, that's had a Keswick convention about mission and life and faith for over 100 years. And at a meeting there, I felt called forward to go forward, though I didn't actually, because I was very shy. But in my heart, I told my youth leader at the time, I felt like I should have gone forward in that meeting to say, if you take the Bible seriously and you trust God, be ready to go anywhere and do anything for him. So I was 16 years old and didn't know really what that meant. So I went to a mission tent, it was called, and then I looked through a card index file that had every country in the world listed. And they needed a car mechanic in Argentina or a nurse in Bolivia, and they needed some type of church planter in Cambodia. And I thought, well, I'm 16, I can't really do that. So I left, didn't talk to anybody. And the next Easter, my sister invited me to go to Birmingham with a group called Operation Mobilisation, which you might have heard of, OM. And I went for 1 week, a very exotic location, East Birmingham, in the shadow of the M6. And we shared our faith with anybody that would turn up. And I came from a very small youth group that didn't have very many people in it, in inner city Manchester, and suddenly realized there were 300 other young people who were all quite, as excited as I was about Jesus. So that next summer, in sixth form, I went to Austria in the end. I didn't know where I was going to go when I left, but I went to Austria for a month and sang songs on people's doorsteps, distributed literature, worked with the local Baptist church south of Vienna. And through university, I was at university, studied mechanical engineering. And then after university, I didn't want to get stuck in a job in England if God wanted me somewhere else. So I joined that group OM for 2 years and ended up in North Africa. So, and that was 35 years ago. So it was step by step, but looking back, it was a long journey. Starts with the smallest step.
Oh, it does. People have talked about, so you're making big steps here. And it's like, no. Most of our steps are little shuffles. Yeah. You're just seeing, 2 weeks apart and you think we've walked somewhere, but no. It's just lots of little shuffles, usually white knuckling it with terror. Where are we going? What are we doing this for? North Africa. What did you do there?
So I was distributed some Bibles, Christian literature, and we were trying to just give people a chance to be able to hear about Jesus, really. So and then I organized summer programs that took young people into North Africa, so all over the region and southern Spain, to be able to share their faith with people that wouldn't have heard it before. So yeah, I did that for about 10 years. on and off based in southern Spain.
Operation Mobilisation, we do know very well because we've been to Teen Street 2 years running to cover that with radio and interviews and stuff. So
brilliant.
I love what OM does. And their big ship's coming back, I think, in 26, they're hoping, to come and do a tour of the UK.
Yeah, well, yeah. I visited at the time when I was working for them. Yeah, when Logos Hope was launched and commissioned, and so they'd done a variety of sports activities, and we were supporting that. So I remember visiting in Canary Wharf back in about 20 years ago. So it'd be great to have it back. Yeah, they do. It's always been part of my life for 20 years, so it's very much still in my heart.
North Africa, I guess, in a sense, not the same as Birmingham, quite killy, but the same sort of thing of with people showing them Jesus.
Yeah. So it's just one step at a time, really, and not. I realized even on the doorsteps of Birmingham and then in Austria, it's like God could use me if I open my mouth and prayed and hope for that I say the right things. It's not me that's doing the work; it's the Holy Spirit and directing people towards Jesus. So I would do what I could do, and I noticed that if I could, and that's been really probably one of the themes of my life, if I could encourage other people to do something similar, then it would multiply what God could do and extend his kingdom. So that's what I've been involved in really ever since, in a variety of methods, but that was the main thing.
I can see some of the Manchester stuff. Even I know Manchester has Manchester City, Manchester United. There's a little bit of rivalry there. Yes. Which way did you lean? I'm guessing United, but I mean, which?
Yes, so my dad actually, after the Second World War, as a teenager, with his best mate, supported Manchester City. He supported Manchester United. You might not know this, but a little bit of history. Old Trafford was bombed in the Second World War, and so because it was near the industrial part of Trafford, so Manchester City let Manchester United use their ground to play home matches, and then following on from that, they would go as single teenagers. They would 1 week they go to watch United play, the other week they go to watch City play. So it was a major part of their lives, but we were always on the red side of Manchester, and so we used to, I grew up watching them. Actually, I'm reliving my childhood, really. I watched them do relatively poorly, not good decades to really live in Manchester in some ways. No, we were lovely people, but it was a bit run down. The 1970s and 80s, and United weren't doing that well. City were the last team to win the title in 1969 until 1993, when Sir Alex Ferguson, not that it's etched in my head, of course, but I do remember talking to my dad on a payphone from North Africa, when Oldham Athletic beat Aston Villa 3-0, and that meant that United had won the championship for the first time in my life, and I was 24 years old. So so we were definitely red.
The fact you remember what you were on a particular type of phone that is etched. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, definitely. I had to go and I listened to it on the World Service, and then realised it had happened. So I knew that I had to talk to my dad. And actually, footballing events have marked me and my dad's life. Actually, I suppose.
Oh, I love that. That's really good. Right, let's just scroll on a little bit. So you've worked with OM a little bit. You developed this passion for being part of God's kingdom building. Where did that translate into what you're doing today? Because it's obviously a passion of football, but there must be more than just that childhood growth of passion. How did you end up doing what you're doing now? Yeah,
well, in the 1990s, I'd been involved at university with Christians in sport. I played rugby, you'll be pleased to know. At school, didn't get on the football team, so got on the rugby team. So played rugby, and then got to university, and I liked football. I love football. And you could play almost for fun, but in the intramural league, it was called. So you had a hall of residence had a team, and it turned out of those 11 players, 6 of us were Christians. We just found out as we got to play. So we met before a match, and we'd pray for our teammates. And then we'd have a little gathering at the end of the season where we'd share a bit more. And we were involved in a group called Christians in Sport, which is still going strong now. And there were 50 of us that met on Tuesdays and then played sport on Wednesdays. And I saw that sport could really be a way to be able to share faith. And so that was encouraging for me. So then I joined OM and didn't do much with sport. You did it in your spare time, or the ship, when it got into a certain port, would try and find a team to play against. Oh, let's play football. And so I was challenged, though, in 1996 in a meeting in Holland. I was standing at the back, and the director of OM at the time, George Verwer, said, well, we've got a vision to start sport and ministry in OM. If you know anybody in the whole world who might be interested in this, get them to send me a fax or give me a phone call. Email had only just started, and I'll talk to them. And I looked to my mate, who happened to be a Canadian champion canoeist, actually, who'd given up his canoeing to join OM as well. I said, I think I should do that. And he said, well, go and talk to George. And I'd never spoken to him properly in my life. That's another story. But I went up to talk to him after 6 years in OM, and I said, hello. And I chatted and said, that sports thing. He said, I'm very encouraged. And I thought, wow, I've encouraged the director of OM. How did that happen? So within a month, he'd called me and invited me to talk to another man who'd started many sports ministries, and to this day probably is viewed as almost like the grandfather or godfather of sports ministry, who lives in the USA. I had to go and visit him, which is a real privilege now looking back. I didn't realize at the time, but I spent 2 days with him. He gave me a big box of resources and said, go for it. And George Verwer's leadership style was, great, Martin, carry on. Let me know if you need anything, and let me see if where you're going to head. So I just began connecting people. So I remember my auntie, who'd known me since I was born, said, I really think this sports thing is just what Martin's supposed to do, because it's just ready made for him. So, oh wow, okay. I didn't even know that was a thing. And so that was in '96, and so we began to develop sports ministry inside OM. And then I found, as I talked to people, there was a Pakistani man in Lahore hosting cricket tournaments with OM, that he still does that today. Fantastic ministry. And so he's a good friend of mine. And so I got connected with him and tried to support him. There was a South African coaching rugby in the Ukraine, and we supported him. And the South African ambassador used to host a sevens tournament in Kiev at the time in the late 90s, organized by OM Ukraine. And so I began to see sport and ministry develop. And one of my colleagues was playing in the Middle East in the first division of their league, but also coaching a Palestinian refugee team in the afternoon. And so we just saw that it was working in various parts of the world. And I knew about ambassadors because my best mate from university had joined ambassadors. My dad was being a vicar at the time in Bolton, where they were based. So I used to come home and talk to them. And we did a few ministry opportunities together. We took a tour to Tajikistan. We played Afghanistan, Tajikistan, 2005. We did some work in Honduras and a few other places. So ambassadors was getting more global, and we were in all sorts of places in the world. So we worked a little bit together. So the idea was supporting these OM teams that do all sorts of stuff and saying, have you thought about sport? And some leaders deliberately would say, I have thought about it, and we're definitely not doing sport. It's like, oh, okay. And others said, oh no, yeah, I love it. I've been doing it in my spare. I'm in the tennis club down the road. I'm actually sharing my faith more with them than the people I do in the book tables with on a Saturday. So some were more enthusiastic than others, but we began to develop sports ministry.
I mean, at least the ones that said no, at least it was clear. You know where you stood.
Oh yeah. No, I'll never forget. And I'd gone through some training about this in ministry as well. And in the year 2000, I went to a sports leadership school, which again is still running today, a 3-month school in South Africa with 24 students from 18 countries, one of whom's now the president of the Madagascar Olympic Committee. There's some amazing people were at that, and others leading various ministries in different parts of the world. But through that, we got some good training. So I'll never forget one of the leaders saying, you know, Martin, I appreciate your dedication to try to get us to do sports ministry. But what I always remember is that verse where the Apostle Paul tells Timothy, sport is of little value. But I'd done my training and I said, but he says that it's of value, even though it's of little value. And he's comparing it to spiritual value here and physical value. So therefore, we must value it and use it. He went, oh, okay, yeah, I suppose so. Anyway, so it was interesting.
But this is the point where we need to go in prepared, because that could easily have just completely hijacked your confidence, your hope.
That's true. Yeah. No, and it was good preparation. It's taken years to get probably, obviously, to this stage of life, but it's and I think that's one of the things that the curse of knowledge. I know these things and I need to pass them on to younger people and a new generation to say there is much more acceptance of it now, but there is value in sport. There is value in being able to express yourself through your body to worship God. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength. So it doesn't become a God in itself, but you can worship God through playing a sport, and therefore that point people towards Jesus. So, and let's not discount sport as an opportunity to share your faith just because you might have had a bad experience in the playground when you were choosing the teams at school, or some other reason. You've got a ministry that you can use even if you don't like it.
Yeah, I wasn't usually chosen last. I was just the last one left.
Yeah, there you go.
Probably illustrates my sporting prowess.
Well, there you go. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that there's not, great value in seeing other people reaching out. And that's why it's great for us to talk.
It is. I remember I was involved. I used the word involved at the smallest possible level. It was a church outreach. They had a big, I think it wasn't quite 5-a-side, a bit bigger than that, but steel fence, concrete. And we used to go there. There's a lot of youth around the area. And I quite like a bit of youth work, but supporting those who do was really my thing rather than being stuck in. So I would go along and play football. My only skill is I'm pretty big and solid. I tend not to move. People bounce rather than knock me over. And I can run and charge and scream. Yeah, that's all I did. And a guy who was a semi-pro guy from Telford United, I think it was, in Shropshire, he came, lovely Christian man, beautiful chap, the most skilled talent I've ever physically seen. And you have these young lads who I'm going to be the next David Beckham back in the day. And then he would come along, this old bloke with a beard, didn't look very fit, just ran rings around him, always gave the ball. Always get the ball off them, always gave the ball to one of the most unlikely to do very well in football, encouraged them, supported them. And it was the amount of confidence that young lad then had. Hey, you get tackled fairly quickly and you get the ball back and give it to them again. And I love the fact that this superbly skillful guy, I've never physically seen it in myself, was able to get the ball off these very talented kids and then give it to somebody else. And it was that was the part that built the relationship, because the lads that are a bit hard had immediate respect. How did you tackle me?
Yes.
And all of a sudden it leads to a conversation.
Yeah, no, definitely. There are opportunities on the field and, of course, on the sidelines as well. That's one of the big things we promote in Ambassadors Football. There's more conversations you can have watching a game of football than playing or coaching it, actually. And that's what we need. We need more people that will volunteer with us to be able to do that type of thing around the country.
Right. Ambassadors Football, what is it you're actually doing today? I've loved the story of North Africa, Birmingham. I mean, not quite the same. Hey, but it's fine. It's the same work, isn't it? It's the same people, really.
Yeah.
Same problems, different relatively. But what is Ambassadors Football doing today?
So, I joined in 2010 and then became British director in 2015. And I noticed at the time that we were all, overworked and underpaid, obviously, but no, we were kind of run off our feet, the staff generally. There weren't that many, and they were in London and Bolton and a couple of other places. But we were trying to deliver football sessions, which wasn't a bad thing, but there just weren't enough of us around. And I thought, wouldn't it be good if we could multiply what we do by developing people within churches to deliver the football sessions that we know how to do? If we could teach and train them, give them confidence to deliver football sessions, we'll see more opportunities to share faith around the country as a result. And so we kind of shifted our focus a little bit, and it's taken time, but that's what we've done over the last 10 years, to be able to say, how can we help you as a local church be church, but do it through football? Here's a vehicle of football that you could use and work through. So you value the football, but you work through it as a platform. It takes you out of your church onto a football field, and you can coach kids, or you can host walking football, or you can get involved in organizing informal football or more organized football if you've got the skill set. But you can be a church on a football field and then bring people towards Jesus as a result. So we have three things that we try to do: invest in people, invest in churches, and share Jesus through football.
But I love how that early work with OM is now replicated through your work today, because you learned about, well, I can't do it all, but I can share the love of Jesus with this person and multiply that. And you've just used the same language for ambassadors where, well, if I can get churches to multiply, all of a sudden we're not run ragged. And it is important that we work hard for God, but we can work too hard effectively around our own strength or just thrashing ourselves when actually, do you know what? There's a much easier way.
Yeah, and I think and we work better together. And I was obviously brought up in faith and in my early adult life inside OM, where George Verwer in particular would talk about valuing the church, working in teams, working in partnership, and I've seen it work personally. So therefore, I'm going to promote it as long as I can. If I ever have influence, I'll try and do that. So I really value the way in which we can complement other organizations or help a church to do its job, because OM always said that they came in with short-term teams often, but said, we're coming to help a local church. We're not there forever. We're only there for a week or a month and we'll leave. So we've got to make sure that the local church is connected to what we do. And so we do similar things all summer long. Now we're helping churches deliver camps. Mm-hmm. But we'll provide some coaches and volunteers that can lead the coaching element, but the other elements of faith and linking with the local church, it's up to the church to do that. So we have to help them to do that.
Because we can't be everywhere, we can't do everything, but we can support those with the skill bases that we've had. For you personally, it's going to be that passion as a young lad growing up with some of the names that I definitely recognize. Your dad then being transformed, your family transforming, which transformed your life, that journey through OM to Birmingham to Austria and then North Africa. And all of that journey now, I mean, it's kind of cool, but it's being used today. And this is why I love doing these interviews as we do, because as I just sit and listen, it's the journey back then when I was in my teens, early 20s, 30s, whatever, when I found Christ. Now I'm using it just in a different context, but all the stuff I've learned, now I can use over here, and it's brilliant.
Yeah. It's the same stuff in a different situation, different circumstance, but certainly building upon all of the other experiences and what's happened. So yeah, it's really, that's it. Yeah.
If a church is listening saying, well, I can kick a football, I'm not very good, we've got a goalpost, we've got a bit of grass, could they help us do something? Could you?
Yeah, we've focused on something. So we've got camps and tournaments and the tours that we do. We take footballers to other countries. In next month in September, a small group will be in southern Spain supporting our office there. But the main thing we love to do is help a church to either develop something it already does, like a weekly football activity, or begin one in their local community. So there's a couple of places here in the Northwest that have started this year, both have churches right next to housing estates. The housing estate has grass within it, still just about, not quite a concrete jungle. Or they have a multi-use games area with a fence around it and a court on it. And so we say, well, if you can come with us on a journey, we call it Community Football Outreach Journey, CFO, Community Football Outreach. We do Zoom calls as training, and then we'll bring a staff member along to talk with a small group. You get your group of volunteers together, some of whom might have football experience, many of whom won't, but they've got a passion for their community or for the kids there. And then we will help to kick off the project by coming in person where it's possible, or over the first weekend or the first couple of days of the outreach itself, and say, have a regular football activity. And here are the tools. We've got resources that we've got that can be used on a weekly basis to share faith through football. And we walk with the church through that. So in September, we've actually got some information evenings that we are going to be hosting, partly because we've got some publicity that's going to be out at the big church weekend. But linked to that. And so if anybody wants to come along, I don't know if we can list them linked to this, or I could say when they're on now, but you can find them on our website. Yeah. On the front page of the website, gb.ambassadorsfootball.org is the easiest way to find it. These information evenings are listed, and there's about 4 of them we're hoping to do in mid-September. So then you get to know, what does it really mean? They're about an hour long. So just says, yeah, here's how you set up a football project. And the key element, the one slide that I always love, is the 4 quadrants that say who, what, when, where. What are you going to do? Who are you going to reach out to? If it's older folk in your community, then you'll probably need to do it at 10 a.m. maybe on a Thursday. at a local sports centre or in your church hall. If you're wanting to reach out to kids, it could be after school or Saturday morning, and then unpacking it practically, but also looking at it theologically as well, and the spiritual element of it, to say, how can your church reach your community through football?
Cool. Right. Just once more, because we'll stick it on the write-up when this goes on YouTube and podcast. But just give us the website one more time so people can get hold of you.
Yeah, the best way to get to us, I always find it, you do it the wrong way around, but it's gb.ambassadorsfootball.org. That's it.
Fine.
If you wanted to do it the other way, then it's ambassadorsfootball.org/GB.
Cool. Hey, yeah. Look, if it works, it works. I remember the W's were important, and now less so. The internet has got a bit clever, and it'll find it for us. Martin, thank you. It's been a pleasure and a delight just to learn more about Ambassadors Football. I came to your yearly thing, which was not my thing because I'm not a football fan, but I absolutely loved it because, as I said to you off air, I love people who are passionate about something, because that passion gets my creativity going and it excites me. And I love the fact you've got all these different people from different parts of the country with a shared single passion of football and Jesus Christ. How can we get the two of these together? Well, actually, we can do quite a lot with that. And that's where what you're doing is brilliant. So thank you, Martin from Ambassadors Football.